Howdy folks. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to take something that's really actually kind of sort of review for college algebra. But if you don't get this right, you're really not going to be able to understand a lot of other things that are in college algebra. And so what I'm going to show you here is what we call combining like, we call them like terms. Now, before I can really show you what it means to combine like terms, I'm going to have to define what a term is. And we're also going to define a couple kinds of terms, and we're also going to define a couple other mathematical elements so that we can distinguish from a term and other kinds of elements. And so there are three very important terms that are commonly used in algebra. Now, it really depends on which math teacher or which mathematician or what student you're talking to. People could interpret them slightly differently, but I'm just giving these to you the way that I teach them, okay? And what I'm going to talk about is the difference between a term, an expression, and an equation, okay? Now these are conventions for communicating mathematically. There is no mathematical judge out there that has decided in a dictionary that this is exactly what these things are. So we're just going on mathematical convention here, okay? So the basic idea is that a term is any sort of mathematical statement, like for example 7x squared, okay? It may include some multiplication and also some exponents, and it may actually be a fraction. It could be what is called a rational term, okay? But what is not included in this term is the addition and subtraction of other elements, okay? So, for example, if I say 7x squared plus 4x minus 5, most people would not say that this is a term. They would say that this whole thing is an expression, a mathematical expression. It's almost like a whole sentence. But note that it does not include an equal sign. It also does not include a greater than or less than symbol or anything like that. But here's what we might say. What we might say is that these individual pieces of the expression can be referred to as terms. Okay? So 7x squared, that's a term. 4x is a term. Now technically this plus symbol is a verb, but it's also an adjective. It's saying that the 4x term is positive. And even though this minus symbol says to subtract 5, it's also indicating that the value of the 5 is considered to be negative. So you could say, instead of saying minus 5, you can say plus negative 5, okay? But each one of these is a term. Now, the terms that include the letters, which we refer to as variables, these are called, this is a term, a mathematical term, and this is a mathematical term. These two mathematical terms would be referred to as variable terms. Variable means that they can take on different values depending on the value of x. So if x took on a value of 1, 1 squared is 1 times 7 is 7. And so the value of this term would be 7 if x is equal to 1. But if x was equal to 2, 2 squared is 4, and 4 times 7 is 28. So if x took on a value of 2, then this term would take on a value of 28. And since this term can take on differing values based on different values of x, it is called a variable term. So these are variable terms. But this 5 here, this minus 5, that is what's called a constant term. Constant term. because it does not have a variable in it. And so it doesn't matter what value x takes on over here. Over here, this is always going to have a value of -5. And therefore, the value of this term will stay constant at -5. Therefore, it is a constant term. Okay? And so, one of the things that we understand is that mathematical expressions can have any number of variable terms, but mathematical expressions usually only have one constant term. And the reason they have one constant term is because if you were to put 3 or 4 constant terms into a mathematical expression, you would be able to combine them because all constant terms are like terms. So let's get to what it means to combine like terms. What are like terms? Okay. We're not going to get to equation in this particular video, but basically an equation is where you have a mathematical expression with an equal sign and another mathematical expression on the other side of the equal sign. Okay, that's what an equation is. Okay. All right, so what does it mean to combine like terms? Well, first let's identify what are like terms. So like terms, it's really not a very good definition. This is not a hardcore mathematical definition. It's more like a casual definition. Like terms have the same letters to the same powers. Now, when I say powers, I mean exponents. Okay, exponents. And let's see what that means. So like we had 7x squared a minute ago, right? And if let's say that we had the mathematical term -3x squared. Now the 7 and the -3 are irrelevant as to whether it's a like term or not. The values, the numerical values in a term can be anything and the terms can still be like terms. What matters is that both of these terms have an x and just an x, and the x is raised to the second power in both of them. Therefore, these are like terms. Let's say that we had 5x squared, and let's say that we had 4x. Now, these two terms are not like terms because even though they both have an x in them, the x is to the second power over here, but over here the x is to the first power. Therefore, since they are not to the same power, they are not like terms, and therefore they cannot be combined into a single term. They can be set next to each other in an expression. We can have the mathematical expression 5x squared plus 4x, but we cannot combine them into a single term to simplify the expression. Okay? All constant terms are like terms. So if we have the constant term 3 and the constant term 6, because neither one of them has a letter to any power, although that's debatable, since we don't see a variable to any power, that means that they have the same letters to the same powers, so these two terms are like terms. Okay? I'll give you one more example because you could face something like this that's a little confusing. What if you had 2x squared y? So now this term has two different variables in it, 2x squared y, and let's say that we had 7x squared again, okay? These two terms are not like terms. Even though they both have an x, and the x in each one is raised to the second power, this term also has a y in it, and this term does not have a y. Therefore, these two terms are not like terms, okay? And therefore, they cannot be combined into a single term because they are not like terms, okay? And so, in math, we can only combine like terms into a single term. And let me just show you what that means. We already know that 4 plus 5 can be combined to equal 9. We also know that 7 plus -3 can be combined to equal 4, right? These are constant terms. We've been doing this since elementary school. This is combining like terms because all constants are like terms. But if we had 7x plus negative 3x, this is x to the first power. This is also x to the first power. Therefore, these two terms are like terms, and all we have to do is do the same thing we did here, is take the 7 and add it to the negative 3. So 7 plus negative 3 is 4, and then we'll include the x. And so the reason that that's happening is because it's a form of distribution. The 7 is being multiplied by a variable number, and the negative 3 is also being multiplied by the same number of that variable number, and therefore their coefficients can be added together. Okay? Now, if everything I just said was a little confusing, just ignore it and go with the example. If we had 9y to the third power minus 2y to the third power, they both have the same variable to the same power, and therefore we can do 9 minus 2 is 7, and then just put on the y to the third power. Note that we do not change the y to the third power. It just goes along for the ride. The only thing we're changing here is the 9, or we're combining is the 9 and the minus 2, okay? And so that's basically what we mean by combining like terms. I guess I could show you one more example over here. Let's say that we had 19ab squared plus 5ab squared. Since both of these terms have ab squared in them, just ab squared, they're like terms. So all we have to do now is the 19 plus the 5. 19 plus 5, that's 24. And then we just carry over the ab squared. And that is combining like terms.